wow. Welcome to the fifth. I'm
Really? The
90%
fifth?
sure. I'm 90% sure. And
Hmm.
Lucy and Corey's anti-power hour.
Anti-power.
That's what I said.
Just to emphasize. Oh yeah, no. I just wanted to emphasize.
Oh yeah, no, you should definitely emphasize it. I don't know if we've ever
Yeah.
talked about my dislike of the term "rest in power" on this podcast.
Oh, do share. I don't even think I've heard that from you.
Oh, I just it's like I get why it's done. I think it's often done by more oppressed than I am minorities and stuff. I don't want to I'm not gonna be like, stop saying that, but my preference is I don't like power. Now I know you're like, okay, somebody didn't have power in life, they were killed perhaps in some horrible unjust thing, like rest in power. I get the idea, but I don't like power. I'm trying to abolish power.
Oh yeah.
Rest in power. Peace. I like peace. I don't like power. So I don't know. That's just...
Yeah. No, I think I mostly agree with that. For sure. I mean, there's in radical spaces a lot of attempts to like reclaim power in some way, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's why part of the name of the show. I mean, anti-power is like a really good way to think about anarchism, I think. So
I can't remember who actually came up with this name. Do you? I know was it?
I came up with this name.
Was it you? It was you. Okay.
Yes.
Because sometimes behind the scenes in Non Serviam, Chris will say something that he thinks is stupid, and then it'll secretly be really good. So I can remember if that was one of those things.
It's funny you brought this up because Chris, who for our viewers is the editor.
He is
of our show. Producer and editor.
The most organized man or woman at Non Serviam. So without him, we would all die. Nothing would ever happen. So
it's funny because Chris made his a yearly trip down to my neck of the woods, which he often does, and we saw him 2 weeks ago, and he came over, and we had dinner, and this came up,
you ratted on me to him about how it's not always your fault that we don't get shows out. Sometimes it's my fault. And
oh yes, I did say that to him. Yeah,
that is. I mean, I can hardly dispute that. So.
Yeah. No lies here.
But also
total honesty.
Stitches. So I'm gonna have to come over there.
Oh yeah, fair. We'll do a live recording as you're beating me up.
We will.
And that came up with Chris, and I was flabbergasted, and I that's why I had to go back and look at our messages on Twitter, and it's hard to look at old Twitter messages as shit because you can't search them as far as I know. So I had to go back to like last year and find out where I was like, oh, we should do a show called this, and I sent it to Chris, and he was like,
oh, so that was the proof. All right, sold, good.
Yeah.
Laminated.
I needed some evidence.
NFT
some hard
3
evidence.
years ago. That was a terrible idea.
No, I'm good on that, but yeah.
So you live in Florida. Still.
Supposedly.
Never been. I've never even been to the airport. I've been to the airport in Texas, and you also lived there once, so somehow that's related for me. But Florida, it might not be there at all.
You don't seem very southern, I guess.
For a couple of years there, I think I was trying it out, trying to be southern.
Trying it on.
But I'd be the type of southern that's actually from like Massachusetts. Like the type
not
of
southern. I mean, I'm not southern. I'm from New York City. I live in southern areas now.
Did I know that you're from New York City?
I'm from Queens. I share a birthplace with the two most famous people that I share a birthplace with.
Spider-Man?
Forest Hills, Queens, specifically. Yeah, Spider-Man and Donald Trump.
Wow.
So the exemplar of using power responsibly, if one can, to go back to our earlier conversation, and the exemplar of using power irresponsibly. So it's a nice dichotomy, the duality of man, right, and Forest Hills, Queens.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? We were absolutely not going to talk about this, but how many decades behind the times? I finally watched Spider-Man 3, and it was terrible.
Oh,
just
good
as
for
the legends,
the legend.
But I also watched Into the Spider-Verse, and that was pretty good. I liked that a lot.
Oh, yes. We get the real dichotomy of the Spider-Man movies here.
My friends and I had an evening double feature of Spider-Man.
Why'd you guys settle on Spider-Man 3?
Because I was like, oh my god, I never watched that. And then Alexis, shout out Alexis, who will never see this, hi, was like, well, we're just going to have to watch Spider-Man 3. and then we did. And
It's
it was
definitely a movie you should watch if you've never seen it. I saw it in theaters when it came out, and I was a little disappointed. I think it's a little underrated now, all things considered, because it
it's
at
pretty
least
bad.
has some good moments and some good characters, but the bad stuff kind of dominates, and like that's what you to remember.
That was
I would
pretty
say.
rough. I was waiting for just the emo hair and the like. I mean, hell, I thought the at least the first Tom Hardy Venom was like kind of trash fun, but Tom Hardy's kind of always elevates something that sucks. So like even Venom, I was like underwhelmed by because I'm like I've already had some fun with a dumb Venom
I
movie.
I haven't seen Venom yet.
I just think Tom Hardy makes shitty movies better, and I like a person who does that.
Yeah,
Someone who brings it to a movie that is absolutely not worth it.
that's fair. But I'll still go to bat for Spider-Man 1 and 2. I still think are some of the best superhero movies I've ever
I
seen.
do not remember Spider-Man 2 at this point because it's been so long, but I did a rewatch of Spider-Man 1, and damn, that shit actually held up really well. Willem Dafoe was really
Yeah.
delightful
Yeah.
in his evil. And I actually have more tolerance for melodrama than I did when I was a teen. So
I'm
that
surprised
type
by that.
of melodrama, it was working.
Yeah.
I think Tom Holland is so delightful, and more so than poor emo Tobey Maguire. But he never got a movie, as far as I can tell, nearly as good as like that first Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah. I like Tom, but I love Toby. I grew up with it. And yeah, those first two Spider-Mans, I mean, visually, thematically, I think they're so good. They hold up.
Yeah.
I met Sam Raimi at MegaCon earlier this year. I got a Spider-Man movie poster signed by him, and he wrote, "It's on my wall. I'm looking at it. It's on my wall." But he wrote, "Be responsible," on the poster. And he was really nice. This really meek, kind of dorky little guy. Yeah, I told him I want him to direct the next Batman movie that they're making because I think that
I
would be
mean,
sick.
I'd sign up for that shit.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. I don't think they're gonna do it, but yeah, that would be super fun.
I skipped directly to Evil Dead 2. I don't know if that's illegal, but
I haven't seen his horror movies. I'm not as much into horror.
I'm not in like as a genre in particular. I don't really seek it out. I just watch it sometimes. Evil Dead 2 is a lot of fun, I would say.
Oh, I want to watch it. Sit down just because I really like his sensibilities from all the movies I've seen of his. Most of them superhero movies because that is a genre I really like and seek out.
It's weird as hell.
I'm sure.
It has. The visuals are great. In our CGI life, there's some really fun stuff. I don't know.
Oh.
It ain't scary or nothing. There's no.
It ain't scary.
Yeah.
But it's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Gotta watch the third one now, I guess.
Yeah, didn't that just come out?
Well, I don't know. He's done more shit, but I was thinking of Army of Darkness, where.
Oh no, that one, yeah. But they just made a new one, I think.
Campbell travels back in time for reasons I can't fully explain that happen at the end of Evil Dead 2. Forget why it happens.
Well, the lore is. You gotta respect the lore.
Well, I'm glad we covered. This is secretly the anti-power except superpower hour. This is the pro.
Yeah.
Actually, now I'm just thinking about there have been some critiques of superheroes that I always think are unreasonable, where it's like an objection to the power of a superhero, not just like in the Incredibles sense, but just like as like a metaphor, like somehow having a super like that's some sort of fascist like vibe if anyone has powers in the way that superheroes have, and I don't like. I find that interpretation very weird.
Well, I think a lot of superhero material, especially after the first few decades of the genre being around, like started to explore that. I think and be a little aware of that because I think it's an interesting idea. Power fantasies are, dangerous thing, and that's in many ways what they are. But it's like going back to earlier, what does power mean? And if it can just mean like efficacy in a way, like maybe that's a weird way to think about it, but it's not power over necessarily. That's the idea. I think a lot of the stories is to kind of examine the difference. Maybe.
Right. Yeah. So to completely go back on my objection to the term rest in power, maybe it's not. Maybe that's not. I mean, that's not what it is at all. Really, like rest in power with like yourself or like with some other way, not over others necessarily.
Right.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
there's
think that.
lots of words that I have like a fucking baby libertarian objection to. Like I got, like $1.50 in scholarships for college when I went to the college I went to, and they were like, "Here, write an essay about leadership," and I was like, "Leadership is stupid. Makes me think of leaders who are stupid. I don't like leadership." They were like, okay, here, have like $11 and come to our college, I guess." So.
What? That's awesome. That's awesome. It's a very Lucy thing to do. Leaderless Lucy.
That's that. Wow, thank you. I'm trying my best with that. Oh my god, there was a larger point somewhere.
There always is.
Oh, I mean, there's an appeal in like in the this is now like officially free association in my brain, but like there's like obviously an appeal that people have with somebody who has power and who doesn't use it, perhaps because that is such a fucking fantasy.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, and that's what we think. That's what people who trust, the political process in the most status quo way think. Like, no, my guy's going to be in power, and he's going to have exactly as much political power as Donald Trump, but he's going to be better.
Yeah.
And he's going to not exploit it, as opposed. I mean, yeah, maybe he'll be a little less terrible than other guy, but like.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the good stories, I think, explore the limits of their power in that way, and how it doesn't go as far as to affect structural change, perhaps.
And I mean that people hate Superman so often because he's too powerful, right?
Yes.
And like recent interpretations of him, like the Zack Snyder stuff, is like the sort of arguably more realistic menace of somebody being like godlike, being like, well, I better not piss you off. And the whole point, obviously, is that he's a Boy Scout from Kansas, so.
Yeah. Well, I think in some way it's an escapist in that way. It's escapist fantasy in the way you're talking about. It's the idea of power being used in a way that it's regularly not used in the real world. But on the other hand, it can be like an aspirational fantasy too of, like you said, I guess reclaiming or cultivating power, not power over, but in terms of efficacy and changing the world, perhaps, at least long-term margins.
And like of late, I've been more interested in things with AI, robot type things, and I'm thinking again, because of the obvious connection to superheroes, of the Iron Giant, which is another thing about learning to not use your power for bad things. But the Iron Giant, for me, is more fascinating because I think, canonically, it doesn't say it like directly, but he's a weapon. Like the Giant is actually a weapon that learns to not be a weapon, which.
Oh yeah.
Is like it's a more detailed, like more specific version of just power, I think. And that's more, I don't know, that's more intriguing for a story for me.
Oh yeah. I mean, the Iron Giant is arguably one of the best superhero movies, one of the best Superman movies.
You got him right back there.
Yeah, there you go. And I have this, maybe the exact same toy. I don't know. I think they made a couple toys of him, but I have
not enough.
Yeah, not enough. But it's yeah, that's a beautiful film, and I agree, it's a little more existential than a lot of the superhero stories. I mean, I've heard that the director Brad Bird, his idea when he like had the idea for the movie or put it in a sentence or something, it was, what if a gun had a soul?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That's just what you're saying. And
Hogarth does actually say you don't have to be a gun, but I know there's a deleted scene where like the Giant is remembering, maybe from his home planet, that there are other giants, like, I don't know if it's like a factory making lots of giants, but like he is, his purpose, like he is a weapon.
Yeah. But he goes against that, his purpose, in a way.
Man, that movie rules.
Spoilers for 24-year-old.
Makes perfect sense that movie failed in some ways, but also it's so good. It's so perfect.
Failed in what do you mean? Like box office?
Yeah, just because it's, children can do deep movies, but it's also like set in it's set, in the 50s. It's like for parents during that era would be like, look, it's your childhood and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
It's almost for everyone, so maybe I understand why they failed to find an audience, because advertisers are stupid also, and they're like, oh.
I'm almost glad it didn't do great, because I feel like that would have led to some sort of sequelitis. Maybe it would have taken all these years later, but I don't love the idea of them, at least, especially without the original creators, like returning to that seems
There's
Terrible.
something
I love it how it kind of exists, and it's the story, and it ends with teasing a sort of return for the giant. Felix, my cat just opened my desk drawer. It ends with a return, teasing the return for the giant, but there's no. I don't see a need for another story. It just ends on this note of hope, so it's nice.
I mean, there would have been like a Saturday morning cartoon show or something if that had been a big
Oh, yeah, like the Disney movies getting
which would have been sort of terrible, but also entertaining. But technically, in the horrible Ready Player One movie, the Iron Giant appears. But
oh, really?
Yeah, it's not. It's stupid.
Oh, okay.
And it's I don't know. In this modern era, you have to make your own canon. Not that that's the same universe, but just like I can throw it back in my mind. It's of no consequence.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking about that show, like the cartoon. What would it? It'd be like Hogarth and the Giant, just like shenanigans the weekly shenanigans,
Perhaps.
Up to no good.
They would solve all the. Actually, I've never seen the wasn't there Superman 4 with lots of nukes? Like they would just like.
Yeah, Superman 4: Quest for Peace.
Yeah, they would go to the UN eventually somehow. They would work it all out.
Great children's programming.
We never get to like any of the 80s conflicts. Actually, we never even get to the Cuban Missile Crisis because the Giant would have solved it long before that. What a relief.
This cartoon involves the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes.
And like Hogarth is like an adult now.
Well, I mean, that's the thing with, I mean, I just said that it would be a Saturday morning cartoon show, but, like, it would have to be set in the 1950s. And again, I think there's a whole element of, like, children don't know that the past existed. They're too stupid. So, like...
I love that it's set in the 50s. I agree. It should stay set in the 50s. It feels like it's invoking, like, the old monster, like the B-movie, monster movies stuff,
Oh, and that's
it's
definitely...
just this great vibe.
On purpose. I think some of the, like, the posters and other things have directly been like, the thing from outer space,
Oh, really? I don't think I
actually I should probably rewatch The Day the Earth Stood Still at some point, because surely that was an influence a little bit.
I've only ever seen the remake of that movie.
Oh, that's no good.
Which I doubt is considered good.
No,
it was a long time ago.
I mean, the original one's not my favorite, but it's sort of one of those movies you should probably watch, I guess. And it does have a giant space robot, so
that's cool. Well, they're going for it. Can't be that bad of a movie if you have a giant space robot.
That's my motto. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've heard you say it many times. Yeah, conferences and stuff. It wasn't always relevant to the topic at hand, but we could always count on you to remind us of that fact.
That's strangely believable.
Strangely believable.
Yeah, I'm just like
the story of Lucy Steigerwald.
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, you ever thought about writing like a memoir?
In order to write a memoir, I feel like more horrible things should have to happen to me, or I have to become more insightful about myself, and I don't expect either of those things. So.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, hopefully some horrible things happen to you. I really hope like horrible tragedy besets you, and so you can, write your memoir.
Is that that might actually be a Chinese or, who knows? It could be totally fake. May you live in interesting times. Like it's supposed to be like a curse, kind of a like.
Right. Yeah. Well, people say that a lot about the last few years. It's definitely felt pretty interesting and not so fun.
That's every time, I think, to a point. Like.
Oh, I think we definitely overrate it. But when I think to like the 90s, I feel like maybe that was like the one. You had a few years there where it was relatively calmer.
All right.
Or at least
Fukuyama.
At least perceived. And welcome our new guest for this episode, Francis Fukuyama.
Not that I ever fucking read that book or have any.
I've never read that
beyond book. The end of history as a vague concept, which obviously.
No, I don't think it was. I think it was just coincidence. All those factors, colliding at various points in time.
That feels like. I don't know. I would obviously have to read it, or at least the fucking Wikipedia page about it. But like, was that just like an overly Cold War obsessed? Once this ends, why there'll be nothing else.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was an over. I'm not too familiar with his thesis, but my understanding is that it gets a little oversimplified for the dunk value. Perhaps.
I'm sure that's true.
So there's probably more going on, but yeah.
Well, if he wants to call in and scold.
Yeah, Francis will let us know.
Is he alive?
later.
He might be.
Yeah, Francis Fukuyama. We can get Francis Ford Coppola. Will come on. We'll have all the Francises.
Frances the Badger. Did you ever read those picture books when you were little about Frances? She's like a little badger family.
No, I
Those were
never.
good.
I
Those
never
were
did.
cute books.
But it's strangely believable that you read those.
Bread and jam for Frances. She won't eat anything except bread and jam.
Well, who could blame her?
I forget what else. I have one in Spanish that I keep trying to read. It's a lot harder in Spanish.
Can you read Spanish? Or because if you
I'm
can't, I wouldn't try to read it.
I'm at like 75% of a picture book proficiency. So
picture book. Those are pictures. They're in Spanish. The pictures are in Spanish, so they have that yellow tint from Breaking Bad.
A picture book traditionally has some words, though there are exceptions.
Is it about like the cartel, like Breaking Bad too? Francis gets caught up with the cartel.
Wait, which one's who's Francis?
I thought you said that was the Badger.
Oh yeah, no, it is. Yeah. How do we get to break? Wow. Okay. There's not enough coffee.
Well, my mind sort of,
There's not enough coffee in this mug.
Yeah, my mind. What is the picture on your mug? I'm curious.
That's where that was my childhood home.
Holy shit, that's cool.
Moved from like 2 years ago now. So
I thought it was like a haunted house. I mean, I guess it could. Is it also a haunted house in addition to being your childhood home?
Technically, the house I live in now is much older, but
and therefore more haunted. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, is that how it works? I don't know.
No, I mean, if someone got murdered in a house today, it would become haunted, right? Is that? I think that's how.
I think that ups the chances of hauntings. That house was weird, and it was built by German immigrants in the 30s, and therefore, when I was little, we all agreed that they must have been Nazis, which doesn't really check out since they moved from Germany in the early 30s, which actually suggests the opposite. But
they were too extreme for the Nazis. They were Nazis. Like, you guys are too nuts for us. Go build houses that Lucy Steigerwald is going to grow up in.
That sounds very bad. I feel like people who are too extreme for the Nazis end up on like a moon base or something. Like they go.
Yeah, they're up there. They're up there. They're still scheming.
Wow.
Strangely believable.
Not at all believable. Oh my
Strangely
God.
unbelievable.
There was 8 better points before you asked about the mug. What in God's name?
Oh, I just noticed it and was curious. I'm a terrible co-host.
Well, that's great because I'm a terrible host, and together,
oh my God, that's perfect.
We'll entertain only ourselves and no one else.
Yeah. Well, I assumed that was what I thought with the show idea.
I think I was desperately trying to get maybe to a segue, because I'm also 2 months behind the times.
Segues are overrated. I mean, if that's a perfect segue into the discussion of how segues are overrated, I think. Like, I just love like rapid fire shifting the topic of conversation with people. It's super fun. It's way more fun.
I mean, is it fun for the audience? The audience isn't. They can hop on board. Or
please comment and tell us if this is fun for you.
No, don't actually tell us because we'll be our feelings will be hurt if it's not. No, we won't.
Maybe they should comment. I would be devastated if we got one single negative comment ever on any of our videos. I would be devastated.
We can delete them. At least I can.
Oh,
Chris
sweet.
Can.
Yeah, Chris, can you
delete the comments?
Can you delete those comments?
Delete them all.
All right, thanks. I think he deleted them. He said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
People should comment like things they want us to talk about, though. Right?
Yeah, because if someone actually does say that, we actually would talk about it, and then
for sure,
might be slightly more informative. But I was desperately trying to get from the Iron Giant with a confused, ignorant Francis Fukuyama stepping stone to Oppenheimer, because didn't you just watch that too?
Oh, that is a pretty good segue. Oh man,
it could have been.
I didn't even think about that. We
are 2 months behind the cultural memes. I did not watch Barbie. I'm sure I will at some point in life. But
yeah, you didn't watch Barbie? You're either a really bad feminist or a really good feminist. I'm not sure which. But probably one of I think those are the only kinds of feminists that exist, probably.
I'm my problem more. Actually, there's probably medium feminists. middling feminist. I
No,
think a lot of
you're
people are
only allowed to
screwed.
be really horrible or really good
Oh,
with anything.
oh,
No.
that explains a lot about how I don't do enough. Because I can't commit to being either really terrible or really good. Oh, God.
Yeah, you can only commit to not committing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's relatable.
So, did you watch Barbie at some point?
Oh, yeah, I saw Barbie.
Okay. But did you also watch Oppenheimer?
Yeah.
Did you watch
like
it
many of us?
yesterday?
I saw Oppenheimer literally yesterday.
Okay, because I saw it literally a couple days ago. So.
Oh, what a coincidence! What made you to finally go? Because you didn't see it at first.
I tend to accidentally miss movies a lot because I don't get around to going to theaters. There's actually a fucking drive-in like 40 minutes away, and if it ever goes under, I'm gonna feel personally responsible.
Drive-in theater.
That's legit that exists, and I should give them more money so they keep existing.
What kind of movies do they play? That'd be super fun. I would love to go to a drive-in theater.
They didn't play an Oppenheimer and Barbie double feature, and I checked just in case they were gonna,
Do they play old movies?
They have occasionally. Usually, it's more newer ones.
That'd be super.
They play whatever it's possible. It's legit. No, I literally went because my husband was gonna go see Mission Impossible 147 with his brother, and then his brother's basement flooded, and then I was conscripted, and then he was like, wait, we could actually switch to Oppenheimer, which I know you'd rather see, and so we did.
How nice of him. How nice of your hubby. That's very generous. I don't think I would do that. I'd be like, I want to see this movie.
I mean, he also professes to hate Christopher Nolan, sort of.
Oh, well, now we're getting interesting. And special guest on this episode, Lucy's husband.
No, he's at work making money, like some sort of.
What a genius! Loser. Imagine if we were making money right now. Imagine if we were making money right now. That would be nuts.
That's my favorite response to someone being, what a fucking genius.
That was a smart move of him. And of you to marry well, to marry into it. That's smart. Doing life right.
In spite of, I believe Killian possibly is how you say it.
I always said Cillian. But maybe that's a little silly.
Names are weird, so.
Yeah, it's probably a little silly.
It might. It could be either of those. I don't remember. He's really awesome, but I actually think that movie is weirdly almost bad. And it's like the 2019 Little Women all over again, where I'm like, everyone is losing their shit, and I'm like, I was underwhelmed.
Oh yeah, didn't we say we were going to talk about Little Women on this podcast? Are you bringing it back to that? What a good segue. No,
Well, sometimes I'm like, I know that's you're wrong. The 90s Little Women.
Me personally.
No, just the people at large. Oppenheimer's direction was insane. None of his strength as a director, which is usually like some sweeping wide shot with some cool action sequence happening, none of that happened in that movie. None of the Nolans understand human beings, so to have a lot of mid-shot filled, let's dissect a man, that's not his strength, and that's why that movie isn't very good, I don't think.
Well, that's actually a really interesting perspective on it. Because in part because of the way it relates to my own, which is that I agree that doesn't tend to be Nolan's strength, and that's part of why I don't like. I'm not in love with a lot of his movies because they can feel a bit mechanical and a bit lumbering, and
as much as there's some good shit mixed in always.
Oh, there's some. I mean, his movies are fascinating to me. I'm not really in love with most of them, but even the ones I don't love, they're so interesting to think about.
That's usually what I've said about him. Like he's always worth watching, even when he never makes it to the finish line. As far as
it's just his style. It's so the characters often, like you said, feel more like expositional, robots.
Is there a lot of that?
And so, but this kind of leads me with to a different take because my favorite Nolan movie by a good margin is Memento. Have you seen that?
I loved that when I was a teenager, and I do not fucking remember.
Okay.
Much.
Ironically, you forgot it.
I don't remember if, like, I don't know if I'd still love it. It was
Okay,
very.
I'd be really curious what you think of it now because I actually think really like Memento. I've seen it many times. I think it's great, and I think it's his movie that's most rooted in character and in, like you said, the exploration of a person and their psychology, rather than like getting lost in a lot of his high concepts and big ideas and stuff. Memento is just about this dude, and I think it's a great movie. And I felt like Oppenheimer. I liked it. I didn't think it was perfect, but I liked it more than you, definitely.
Mhm.
And I liked it in part because it felt like a return to a little more character focused. And you're saying it's not his strength, and I guess I get that, but I mean, I found it enthralling at times, and I thought the performance of Oppenheimer was brilliant, and maybe that
Oh
helped.
yeah, and I think that, like, I have heard what Oppenheimer the real dude sounded like, and Murphy sounds exactly the same.
Yeah.
In some of the shot again, like, it's not like I know his face super well, but there's a book that has Oppenheimer's picture. I feel like I've seen that one picture a lot, and like some angles, I
Okay.
was like, oh yeah, he looks like the book cover. Like he
Yeah.
looks right, he sounds right. He doesn't sound. He sounds American to me, but weird old timey American, which the actual Oppenheimer sounded like.
Hmm.
But it's so overstuffed. There's so much exposition that makes me feel like the movie both doesn't reveal enough and thinks that I'm stupid and has to exposit about Oppenheimer too much. I think the non-linear thing is actually a giant mess and it doesn't work very well. And once again, it's like I'm being handheld, but also like it's going fast and it's not actually seeing if I'm keeping up. It's very weird.
Yeah, I definitely I can sort of half or maybe three-fourths agree with a lot of that.
It actually
I
felt like
do.
the inside of my own brain. Not that I, know anything about physics or have become deaf recently, but like the direction felt like the inside of my own brain, and that is not a compliment, sadly. But it was strangely like, oh yeah, there it is. There's my brain. Like the speed of it. Also, his cuts, dude never lingered on a shot, including
Yeah,
including like mid shot talk shots, and like just
that's my
fucking.
major complaint. He never really let up, gave you a time to
It was
maybe
odd.
process. There were some moments that maybe, but yeah, I kept wanting maybe it to slow down for a minute.
It needed to slow down, but it was also too long. It was.
Yeah, it was pretty long, and I thought, like you said, a lot of maybe exposition that was unnecessary.
And there's still some fucking tropes, like the Robert Downey Jr. characters, like lackey, like his the guy who worked for him,
He's just like
the
a
la- the
surrogate.
lackey being like, oh, I actually respect the guy your
Oh,
nemesis is like into, like his honesty and his like, like I don't know, it's just like I've fucking seen that before, dude.
yeah, that's fair. I really enjoyed the performance of Cillian Murphy and enjoyed again there were some really high points, like that scene where they celebrate, I guess, the bombing, and he's having like images of what he's imagining he brought
God
about.
knows I see what they did there, but I don't think that even worked for me either. I don't
Oh,
know.
I found that scene incredibly moving, and I thought the sound design was amazing. I think they should the sound design is maybe the best part of the movie. The manipulation of the sounds was incredibly effective and stylistic, and yeah, that
Again,
scene worked for me personally.
like there's no subtlety except in what year it is occasionally, and like some other stuff where I'm like, you could just tell me. Every once in a while,
Yeah, the non-linearness didn't work too great for me. I agree with you about that.
I mean,
Um,
all of the actual Manhattan Project stuff I found interesting. Like my secret boomer man soul, I'm always like, just stick with World War II a bit. Like,
hmm,
I mean, I don't know a ton. I didn't previously know a ton about how Oppenheimer was treated by, during McCarthyism, and how the whole element, like, this is how they're going to treat you just because you had an open mind about certain political things and are not inclined to throw your friends under the bus. They're going to treat you this poorly after
yeah,
you were, an American hero, patriot, did all this for your. Like, I mean, that's pretty damning, like, no doubt
Yeah.
about that. But I didn't need all of that. Like, I didn't need to feel like I was being questioned by a committee, you know. Um,
Yeah, I can see that movie going on. Part of the movie went on a little long, maybe. Once they get to that part.
and as tradition, anything he had with women was Nolan was very weird. He's like, oh yeah, women exist, I guess. Anyway.
It's funny you say that. My wife, many viewers will know as Kelly V, who you've interviewed and has been on the show, and who writes for C4SS. You can find her articles. So we saw it together, and she liked it as well. But we'll probably agree with some of your complaints. But anyway, yeah, Nolan never seems to have much of a place for women in his films. And my wife actually pointed out she liked that this movie. She liked what was her name, Kitty, Oppenheimer's wife.
Yeah, Emily.
Yeah,
Blunt.
Emily Blunt. Really liked her portrayal just because it kind of showed this. She says she's biologist. She's a scientist like Oppenheimer, but then she gets thrown into this household wife role. And does not like being a housewife. Becomes develops a drinking problem and kind of her. And here I'm just kind of relaying like Kelly's observations about this being for Nolan a more interesting woman character than he often has, especially towards the end when her reputation is being ruined along with his, and she has no say or ability to influence anything as much, and she's pushing him to fight back, and he's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did really enjoy, too, the scene where she's interrogated and she does fight back and she kind of makes the guy look like a fucking idiot.
I did like that scene. I thought it was done well. I thought it was...
I really liked that.
It wasn't over the top, but it was still sort of a triumphant moment.
Yeah.
But she still is such a mystery.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's not super centered at all. She's kind of there. She's kind of, I agree, mysterious.
She's intriguing, but she is very mysterious. And she has this devotion to her husband who's like a womanizer.
Yeah.
But she's also drinking, but she doesn't seem very happy as a housewife and a mother. And we don't understand her, but there's enough for us to be like, what's your deal? Tell me more. I'm just like, no, I'm not telling you anymore.
Yeah, she was never fleshed out as much. I mean, Oppenheimer takes so much center stage compared to the other characters, but yeah, it would have been interesting to see more of her. I agree with that.
And then also Florence Pugh's character is basically a plot point, which I assume is based on like, an actual girlfriend and all.
Yeah, I heard she was based on
and an actual as a plot point. Like, okay, I get that that's also adding to the interest, but I don't know what her deal is. She's a depressed communist who's super mad when he gives her flowers. Like, I don't really. Like, stuff's being dangled in front of me, and I don't know.
I thought it's the flowers thing was funny, especially by the last time he's doing it, she's just robotically tossing them in the trash immediately. I thought that was kind of funny. The movie I felt could have used more humor. It was so long and so dreary, and Nolan, his movies have more humor than people talk about, I think. But this one was actually much more strict, I think. I liked at the beginning there was a gag that really made me laugh when he poisons the apple with cyanide.
That was bizarre, and
apparently based on.
It's very confusing.
Oh, it was very strange. Apparently, it was based on him actually attempting to murder his teacher.
Right.
But I enjoyed like the kind of visual gag and visual symbolism of the apple.
Not fucking subtle, an apple. My God.
Yeah, no, but I enjoyed how those things connected, and I thought it was like a funny joke when his excuse for knocking it out of the guy's hand, he says a wormhole.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'd be like, thank you, you've saved me.
I just enjoyed these little quick gags and like taking these parts of his history and making them a little more fun. Apparently he didn't in real life. Apparently he wasn't gonna. He just got caught. He failed in trying to murder his professor. He didn't go back and say and like change his mind. So the movie made him a lot more sympathetic in that regard, which is
all right. I'm gonna have to officially read the book about him to figure out what the fuck that's about.
Well, I don't know. I'm just going off a few videos I watched that talked about a little bit about the inaccuracies or maybe just changes would be a little more accurate one, maybe more than anything, the part of the movie that annoyed me the most was what felt like a glaring error because they attribute property as theft to Marx.
Oh yeah, I was sitting there. I was.
Yeah, I bet you want, because it's
Does
quick.
the
But I was
does
like,
the does the movie actually think that that's the correct? Because someone says property is not theft but something else, and then someone
well,
corrects.
well, what happens is it's when Oppenheimer meets Florence Pugh's character Jean, I think, and that it's at like it seems to be some kind of light communist gathering, and
Light communist.
and
Light refreshments, light.
and and they're talking, and it's like this dialogue that feels designed to just like, I don't know, seem like what would two like smart like commie sympathetic people in the 30s sound like when they're talking. And and she's like, oh well, what have you even read of Marx? And he says he's read all 3 volumes of Capital. And then he like he calls it turgid, I think, and he quotes it, and he says property is theft, and then she corrects him to, she says no, it's ownership is theft. And then he's like, oh, I read it in the original German, which is funny. And so I was just thinking, like, I'm not sure what they're going off of there, if there was just a bad Google search, because that's Perdun who says property is theft. I mean, it's
Which even I know, but is there nothing I mean, is there
Oh,
nothing
Marx, I mean, talks about it at length. I mean, he engages directly with Perdun and stuff, but it was annoying that the thing that like the one quote from Marx they were trying to like shoehorn into the film to have a character repeat was something not original to him at all, that was more famously associated with an earlier thinker. So yeah, funny niche complaint from people with my views and who read what I read.
I did think C4S like Perdun and see I don't know if I thought like literally like, oh, I better look into see if Corey has written anything about my main association with that phrase is like a C4SS dive, even if it's not
Oh yeah, there's tons of stuff on C4SS talking about that, I think. Yeah.
I did appreciate the insulting of Marx's communists can't write. Like that is another of my unqualified statements. Is that communists can't write, and maybe if they could, they would do better in life. So,
maybe it takes getting used to someone like Marx, who I've tried to read a little more last few years, and at times can be very poetic. But maybe that's part of what it makes it difficult to read.
All right, well, Bob Avakian can't write. No, I don't really. You know what? I'm going to go on a limb and say that Marx was probably more intelligent than Bob Avakian. I'm just going to lay it out there.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Why not? And here's our special guest, Bob. Here's our special guest, Marx.
Wow.
What did you think of your depiction of Oppenheimer? The movie was oh no, I just wanted before just to interrupt you rudely. It has been interesting because Nolan is such a sort of become known, and not wrongfully so, as like this paradigmatic conservative filmmaker, or maybe like sole conservative filmmaker is a better way to think about it. And then he makes this movie, and it's hard to say. It's hard to figure out what stance he's taking on much of it, anything, it seems to me. Especially the communist stuff, and then even the bomb itself. I don't know. Did you have different read?
I don't see a ton of ambiguity. I feel like at the end of the day, I almost don't understand Oppenheimer quite as much as I'm supposed to, just because there's so much exposition where like this man is like this, and there's like,
well, he's kind of a mystery of a man. I think it's kind of intentional. I mean, there's a lot of this dialogue about how he can convince anyone of anything, especially himself. And if you notice, Kelly pointed this out too. His own motivation and justifications continue to shift throughout the film as time progresses, and he says them all with great sincerity and intellectualism, but they nonetheless are inexplicably shift conveniently. At first it's because he's Jewish and his people are in the camps, and then once the Nazis are defeated, then it becomes, well, they have to know the power of what we've invented here. And then as it progresses more, his position changes more. So it felt intimate and stuff, but still he's he's kept at an arm's length almost. We don't know.
Yeah, I was almost thinking of the movie Lawrence of Arabia, which is about an actual other, like a real human who I don't know, I even know even less about behind the famous movie, but a sort of paradoxical man who, Lawrence of Arabia, like he seems to hate war, yet he's sort of a maniac with a bloodlust, and he's like befriending the Arabs and like talking about how they should have certain choices, but he's also this ridiculous British colonialist snob. And at the end of that movie, I'm almost like, what was his deal? But for some reason in that film, I think it works very well. Oppenheimer, the mix between the ambiguity and the direct expositional, like, isn't he just like that? There's something odd about that.
Well, I haven't seen Lawrence of Arabia, so I can't comment on that. But
it's a long ass movie, but it's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, definitely on the list.
It has the best, most respectful version of brown face casting you'll ever see. Because you're like, oh my god, did you really have to do this? But like, they're treated as like as actual people, They're just like Alec Guinness gently painted, and you're like, you didn't need to do that. But
is Alec Guinness?
He plays an Arab feller. And there's some other characters, and you're like, it's
well,
that in West Side Story, you're like, this is embarrassing, but you're also very sincere, and you're like, you're making a good movie overall. So the past to be like that.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely go to bat for West Side Story, despite its flaws and failures. But in terms of movies where the titular character is, I don't know, kind of both subject to like intense scrutiny and remains a mystery and sort of cerebral or unknown, even to himself, perhaps. Or Oppenheimer reminded me a lot of Citizen Kane in that regard.
Okay.
You seen Citizen Kane?
Once. So
okay. Well, I mean, no, it's like the movie, so to go to that one's pretty funny. But what you're saying exactly riffs off of that, where it's Citizen Kane is the series of, spoilers for Citizen Kane, but the series of posthumous these series of posthumous interviews with associates and coworkers and loved ones of Kane after he died, and they all sort of intercut, and the movie's intercut with those interviews and with flashbacks of throughout his life of pivotal moments. And
that actually makes sense as a comparison. I guess you're right.
And so it's kind of like this play with objectivity versus subjectivity, and like what these characters thought he was like, but they're not correct. They only knew part of Kane, or Oppenheimer. So I think that's a really fun thing that really only film can do in some unique ways that I did enjoy that.
Yeah, I think maybe overall it's, editing, the sort of vaguely self-indulgent nature of the movie. Just like there's definitely a really good movie in there. But I was a little like, I don't quite get the like masterpiece, the calls for it being a masterpiece or anything. But also there are a lot of people like Oppenheimer that have these principles that they kind of squish to get a certain type of job. Some of my favorite whistleblowers were certainly like that. People who were very thoughtful, very intelligent, and then got, absorbed into a government job that involved a lot of very bad things. And they clearly managed to talk themselves into it. Now, Oppenheimer obviously didn't whistleblow, but he certainly, I certainly believe in his moral uncomfortableness, even after he did all that work with the Manhattan Project. As far as I know, most of the Manhattan Project scientists were against the hydrogen bomb. I appreciate that the movie makes Edward Teller sort of look like a lunatic, though Oppenheimer's weirdly encouraging of him. Like, you go keep working on your super bomb.
Yeah.
Go ahead. But it's like, there's talk about a cipher of a man. Like, what's your fucking deal, Edward Teller? Why are you so obsessed with this?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But in the movie itself, though, like them acting like, because Oppenheimer has moral qualms now when the bomb presumably would be used against Russia, that's somehow suspicious, as opposed to him having moral qualms
Oh yes, how absurd.
because he become death, and because of the and
Yeah,
that
how absurd.
ending, I guess, is sort of, yeah. I mean, I kind of liked them tying back to it's a little on the nose, but tying back to the whole, will the atomic bomb even accidentally blow up the world? And the recurring extremely dark gag about it being almost a 0% chance, like,
Yeah, yeah.
and the whole idea that, well, oops, maybe we did do that. It was just a little slower, with that first,
Yeah.
I mean, that works pretty well.
I enjoyed those themes. I think a big. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying, and also, actually, now I think about it, Matt Damon actually did, strangely enough, provided the humor in that movie. There was actually a little bit of that too.
Yeah, his incredulity
Yeah.
at Oppenheimer's detachment was pretty funny.
Funny
I found Oppenheimer's detachment even funnier, I would say. I mean, that sequence, I guess, was right before the test, and Matt Damon's character said, is asking about the 1% chance or whatever, and Oppenheimer's like, what do you want from theory alone? And honestly, I keep thinking about that. It cracks me up thinking about. But I think it's a perfect subject matter for a big theme in Nolan stuff, which is, to me, I think is like, people that kind of set out with something like good intentions and then kind of get caught up in this situation and reap these consequences and this chain reaction of events that they didn't necessarily intend at the beginning, and that come to maybe define them or lock them in against their initial good intentions. And I thought this was an interesting case in that kind of situation with the highest stakes version of that.
I did also like how the movie made Harry Truman look like a dick.
Yeah, that was funny. Gary Oldman as Harry Truman was actually a delight. His facial reactions,
which apparently is sort of supposedly that, like, don't let that crybaby scientist back in here, was like a thing.
Yeah,
that actually
really
happened.
That's strangely believable.
Which is weird because I fucking hate Harry Truman, but he also supposedly claimed to feel like, well, he was like, it's my responsibility for those bombs, not yours. Yeah. But like, you can share feeling.
Yeah, that scene was weird.
That was the only kind of weirdness that actually has to be based on reality, I think, because it's otherwise sort of confusing. There are certain things where it only has to be real. I guess. Oh, that and like, I think the whole let's not nuke Kyoto, because I went there on my honeymoon. I think that might be true. I know that not hitting it because of its cultural significance and how beautiful it supposedly is that is true. Which
I thought I heard that it was taken from another incident, that it didn't necessarily happen with the atomic bombings, but maybe the fire bombings or something where.
Well, Kyoto, for the second bomb, Kyoto was taken off, I think. I believe that's true. And
oh no, I just mean the honeymoon line. I thought that was like based on maybe some other historical thing, and they just used it.
That may well be true then.
But I could be mistaken.
I do appreciate old Oppenheimer not letting people forget about Nagasaki, because boy, even now do we do the shorthand and say Hiroshima as if that encompasses it all.
That's a good point.
There is a phenomenal Onion article about this. There's an Onion history of the United States, or of the where I first learned about so many things that I shouldn't have learned about, like Jonestown, which is a weird thing to learn about via a humor book. But there's a thing about Nagasaki is like Nagasaki nuked for the hell of it. Like second bomb would have just sat around or something. And it's like I always think about that because I'm like, God damn, that's true.
Jesus Christ,
that is true. I don't know, like the actual moral qualms of the scientists, as far as I've heard, is very accurate, and that is such a strange thing that like you and I could never imagine being a part of, something like that. And there are people who are part of it, and they're not like, I can't wait to melt the flesh of my enemies. Like, and they're not, most of them, except for fucking Curtis LeMay, are not usually like that.
Well, trying to outrace the Nazis to that weapon. It was probably one of the most understandable sort of motivations to create such a weapon. If
and I can't remember. There's a whole thing about that is not in that film. I almost wish was, where a Nazi telegram was intercepted, and people decided it was referring to like an atomic bomb project in code, and it absolutely wasn't. It was like literal. I think it was like, I'm going to Steve's house, and like, oh, Steve must be in the atomic bomb program. And apparently it was like they totally got it wrong. And it turned out that the Nazis were not progressing at all on this. So that was like a total...
Yeah. I mean, the movie illustrates mission creep in a way. I mean, initially it's entirely about, the worst thing is the Nazis getting it, so our hand is forced. But then they don't even make it before that threat is vanquished, and they still continue. Yeah, pretty brutal.
I did forget. Let's see, do I have within reach?
What artifact is this?
This is Trinitite. This is some nuked sand that I got from a Twitter person who I sent him a creepy civil defense manual thing that I had 2 of, and he sent me Atoms for Peace stamps from 1953, which Oppenheimer actually talks about, and Trinitite. Don't eat it, folks. But I should have taken it with me so it could be like, Papa, is that you? It just kind of looks like...
What is this, like, hilarious?
Slightly green cement.
Historical artifact, creepy historical artifact collection.
Within
community on Twitter that you've been...
Oh, there's Nuke Twitter as a whole thing. There's like a lot
Nuke
of...
Twitter?
I mean, a lot of people actually, like academics and stuff.
Now, Nuke Twitter as in noun or verb?
Both. I would say both.
Okay. I'm not familiar with Nuke Twitter. I mean, I guess I talk about the morality of using nuclear weapons sometimes, but I don't think that's what you're talking about.
No, like more people actually studying it. And there's a dude who does a podcast called Super Critical, which is a perfect name, who works in non-proliferation, but he does podcasts about anything that has any fictional thing, any film or TV sometimes, mostly film, like portrayal of nukes.
I see. Yeah.
And I've talked about some depressing movies with him on there. So there's some good sort of like academic and like things. So I feel like maybe I should join that team just because.
Yeah, that sounds right up your alley. Pretty interesting. You can, but aside from war movies, the genre with the most nukes, for my money, has got to be superheroes. It comes up again and again. Superman the movie, the Batman vs Superman, Dark Knight Rises.
That's true.
I mean, nukes are connected to them.
I gotta watch Superman 4 one of these days because darn it, I like Christopher Reeve, but I kind of don't like that first Superman because there is actually there's actually a going too far.
See you later.
Even for Superman, and the going too far is turning the Earth back. That is officially too powerful.
Well, let me ask you this: have you ever tried to turn the Earth back yourself?
No, because
if you haven't tried, then you don't really know.
It's not working for me as well as it is for Superman. It's kind of just middling. I usually just get overheated under a yellow sun and then have to go inside. So.
Yeah, me too. But no, if we're going to talk about this, I like the ultimate act of a god-like character would be turning back time to save the person he loves. It's at once totally godlike and at once totally human, like, because it's just to save this girl he loves. I enjoy it's so ridiculous, but I mean it's like based on Golden Age comics. It's
just something less, a lesser version. I mean, like the whole Pa Kent having a heart attack thing was always, I don't know who first made that a plot point for Superman. But that is perfect. Even if you think too hard.
I think it's there. I think it's that movie.
In that one. But is that the beginning of it?
That movie started so much for the character, and I would say that, but I could be wrong. Because I know they wouldn't have wanted to have killed them for a long time back on the... a funny piece of trivia is that on the 90s Superman cartoon series, they wanted to kill Ma and Pa Kent about halfway through, and the network literally just told them, no, you can't. That's why they have the episode where instead the Jack Kirby inspired police officers killed, where they wanted to kill his parents there.
I know I've seen that. I watched all the 90s superhero cartoon shows. They were all good.
It's the best. It's the best decade for superhero cartoons, for movies in general, I think.
I don't remember movies, but for superhero cartoons, no question about it.
I know. I really love 90s movies. 90s music is the best. 90s has the best people. I was born in the 90s. It's got the best of everything.
Well, I was born in the 80s, and in the 90s, I was too busy being like, well, I wish it was the 60s so I could watch the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel and, I don't know, look at hippies or something.
Wow, I wish it was the 60s.
Yeah.
Did you really romanticize that decade?
I did.
Do you still do it?
I will flatter myself by saying I have never romanticized as foolishly as adults do today about the past, but I would pay an astounding amount for the ability to time travel so I could, see the Beatles. It would be very loud. There would be screaming girls.
Well, I love
and World War II and literally everything. I just want to see it so badly, and that's always been true.
Well, I love figuring out what, because every person's different. What time in history would you visit? And so is that it for you, the 60s?
I mean, it started there. I don't know if I have to pick one. God,
yeah.
Knows. I know. I would I want to.
No, you got to pick one.
Clash. When I was 15, that's all I wanted was to be able to see the Clash. So.
Yeah, I think it would be super fun to go back and see great bands, but before they got super popular, maybe
so
right on the cusp.
Annoying. Oh yeah, I saw the Beatles in Hamburg.
No, just to experience it in a small a small setting, with a smaller crowd.
Oh yeah.
And just right before they hit, I think that would be.
I mean, in this case, you have a time machine though, so it's not even you can do. You can do more than just see them before they're big. I don't know. You can
You can see them when they're born.
I mean, exactly.
Is that what you're going for? What concert in his is it the Beatles? Number one performer you never saw that you would want to go back and see?
I don't know. There's so many. There's too many.
It's a really difficult question, isn't it? I think I would just. I mean, I grew up listening to Elvis, my dad's CDs, and part of me just what a moment to have seen
so fun.
Elvis moving his hips.
I mean, go to the Ed Sullivan Theater and just sit there for a couple of years, see some sweet stuff.
Yeah, you'd see a lot of stuff, just all the shows for years. That's a funny idea.
Well, I'm still working on that time machine, but
I would go back to ancient Greece. I would want to see the Apology of Socrates live. I want to see the trial.
You need translation problems though.
Yeah, I would need to somehow learn the language, I guess, beforehand, or learn how to understand it vocally.
This is why I like even a ridiculous explanation for the lack of a language barrier. In Doctor Who, if you travel in the TARDIS, it just it gets inside your brain and then it's.
Oh, is that it? I'm not a Doctor Who. I don't know. I'm not a Doctor Who person, but that's a cool explanation.
Farscape, I believe, has translation microbe things that just
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel always does it easy with just Reed Richards usually had some sort of translator thing, and boop bop, it's done.
Star Trek obviously has a translator. In Enterprise, they're they actually briefly struggle because they're just making the technology and they have an actual translating human.
Oh, well, I've never seen Enterprise. Now you've gone back and seen Enterprise, which is probably considered the worst Star Trek show.
I don't know if it is anymore. It has some good stuff.
Should I watch it? I mean, I love Star Trek, but I've never seen that one.
You'll get some weird Bush,
early
War on Terror vibes.
Bush era. Oh, that's lame. What?
Which is strange.
There
is an alien terrorist attack on Earth in season.
That sounds
3.
dumb as shit, to be honest. I don't know. I'm not a very enterprising individual. I'm not sure I'll see the show, but
I think it's worth a watch. I actually stopped watching Discovery because I couldn't fucking take the speechifying anymore, and
I haven't seen any of Discovery yet. I haven't discovered it.
It's frustrating, I would say.
Well, it looked so grim. I don't know. Didn't really look like. I mean, I kind of want to watch it. I'm curious, but
I don't know. Grim isn't even quite the word for it. It's just
it looked dark.
There's some odd things with Discovery, including some oddly unjustified familial bonds which we don't actually see on screen, and like speechifying and crying, and you're like, I need more stoicism in my Star Trek. I need it to really,
I mean,
really count.
do you think that, I mean, I feel like there's a spectrum with how much federation or interhumanity conflict that Star Trek fans enjoy. You know, you go back to the original, and supposedly the rule was no conflict amongst the crew members because humanity has advanced to the point.
Right, which I desperately need to see the original show more. I've only seen a tiny bit of it, and some of the original movies, not all of them.
Oh, you got to go back. Yeah,
I'm watching it all out of order. I've never watched it.
The order doesn't really matter, but I love that stuff. I love the old Star Trek and the movies even. Star Trek: The Motion Picture is probably really underrated. The first one.
I've been hearing that of late. I would like to watch that.
Yeah, it is.
I grew up on Next Generation and even Deep Space Nine, which Deep Space Nine I don't remember a damn thing about at this point, and I definitely need to go back to that. Next Generation I watched during the last couple of years, and I love parts of it, but man, did the women get the short end of the stick.
Yeah, I mean, and you're not going to fare better with the original series. You're going to fare worse.
I figured.
Unfortunately.
Which is weird because people critique both Enterprise and Voyager for sexualizing the female characters. But honestly, they get more writing and they get more consideration. So even if they're, it's obnoxious that they make Jerry Ryan wear like a suffocating cat suit and stuff. But her, the character is so good. Right. That I as a viewer don't notice it. Whereas in Next Generation, when they have like Dr. Crusher and Troy like at the gym wearing 80s
doing yoga
clothing, or like Troy having her fourth like forcible pregnancy alien assault, and you're just like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, a lot of the Troy episode they struggled with those.
I thought I didn't like Troy until about season 6, end of
No, she's great.
7. I actually like her. She just got totally robbed.
She's awesome, and
the writing.
And she's better in those episodes where she's supporting, maybe because they just couldn't figure out really good main plots with her. Unfortunately, it's that crap that you mentioned. But
there's like a thing where she disguises as a Romulan, and there's like she's going to take the bridge exam or whatever that are better. Crusher has like the episode where everybody like disappears, and she has to figure out what's going on.
I like that one.
And immediately you're like, oh, this is all right. I hate Tasha Yar was a fucking disaster, and as much as I remember her death when I was little being traumatic, she was horrible, and her writing was horrendous.
So, I don't know why I've always been a Tasha Yar defender. I don't know. Maybe I just liked her.
It's like hitting on the captain in like episode 4. It's a fucking nightmare.
What?
And being like flattered when the racist portrayal of like the space African warlord episode.
The problem is that the first like 1 or 2 seasons of the show were particularly bad, especially in some of those aspects. And then Gene Roddenberry died, I think, and they were able to move away from that. And so her being killed off early, like but her getting killed off early like means she only had like the early more crappy episodes to work with. I think that's a little unfair to her. Because I love Tasha Yar, but
that's what exists. But I'm like, oh man, she sucks. She's terrible.
Well, have you seen the J.J. Abrams? Are they? It's not really Star Trek, but they're like loosely inspired by Star Trek.
I have seen them, and I do not care for them. the not J.J. Abrams. The third one, Beyond, is actually better. I think.
I didn't see it because I saw the first 2.
They're not messing up existing stuff as much. I don't know. It doesn't bother me as much. The second one is insane because they're literally, it's the fucking Force Awakens of Star Trek. It's like, what if the movie you already saw, but we went...
Perfect comparison. That's a perfect comparison.
It's horrible.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. Yeah.
The only thing J.J. Abrams is good at is television a little bit, because my husband is yet again watching Fringe.
I never saw Fringe. Which is
sort of delightful sometimes.
My dad was obsessed.
Really?
Yeah, he was on the fringe of... Well, he was in the main part of the Fringe fandom.
It has one of my favorite mad scientist characters.
Love a good mad scientist.
Which is always fun, and it actually made me more okay with mirror universe, alternate universe type things.
Plots. Oh yeah, I heard it was that was okay. Well, that's another Star Trek thing. So
yeah, I don't know. It's pretty. I don't know. it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's very network TV and stuff, and there's certainly some episodes where you're like, boy, is this the X-Files ish, but
Man, I wonder what a mirror universe version of our podcast would be like. What do you think? I would be shaven
it'd be
clean, and
well
you'd
organized.
have a goatee, and we'd be like
You wouldn't have a beard, I
we'd be
guess.
like conservatives.
Yeah, organized conservatives.
And
What a
it
life.
would just be Power Hour, or maybe like
Ooh, yeah, that's true. It would.
Pro Power Minute.
We could try. We could try to do that. Maybe for April Fools.
Do what? Oh, be the host of
Yeah, some
podcast as
minute
the
of just, like,
evil versions of
horrible evil.
ourselves.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
You gotta wear the goatee, and I'd have to shave. I don't want to shave.
Have you ever wondered if you suddenly became like right wing, if you could succeed as like a pundit? Because I would never do that, even as like a prank,
Oh
like,
no,
taking this fake
I have
identity.
wondered
Like,
that.
yeah.
No,
Sometimes it looks so easy. Sure, I'm sure the competition.
I think plenty of people wonder this, like because you see how easy it is apparently, and yeah, you're just like, well, I could spoon feed that same stuff.
And some people did that on purpose. Like, I'm pretty sure Candace Owens did that on purpose. Like, I'm going to be a terrible right-wing person.
Right, yeah. I mean, I really have no idea about
some people are truly
motivations,
terrible. Some people
her inner motivation. Kind of an Oppenheimer in that regard.
Anybody who was like a Democrat and then 2 years later was like a far-right lunatic, I do sometimes wonder. Like, in a pundity way, sometimes I suspect they did it more deliberately.
Yeah, that's fair to suspect it.
I was going to say is arguably worse, but it's actually the same, I would say, in some ways. I don't know.
What do you mean? Worse than what?
Well, people always get, isn't there like a Norm Macdonald joke about people talking about the hypocrisy of Bill Cosby being like the worst part, and him being like, no, I think wasn't the rape the worst part?
Yeah. I see what you mean now. Yeah,
people do get bogged down in that as if somehow that's
right.
like
the worst part is not the hypocrisy. Of course. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
People get very obsessed with that, including people that I will not name specifically, but who are obsessed with like the hypocrisy of, the media and the Democrats. I'm like, yeah, I know everyone is like, that's not a principled argument. That's just a swamp to get fully stuck in.
Yeah, we got to drain the swamp, right? We got to drain that swamp.
That's why I almost didn't say swamp. I tried to say
you almost didn't say
bog
you
or a mire or something.
Bog or a mire.
I don't know.
We got to drain those too. We got to drain the bog. That'll be drain the mire.
We need those wetlands for something. Well, we don't need the Washington D.C. wetlands of the government, but
turn it back into wetlands. That's what we got to do.
Yeah, actually, that would be better. Hey, don't drain the swamp.
Fill the swamp.
Yeah. New motto.
It just sounds like though we're like, yes, run for office and be corrupt. If we take that meaning, the standard.
Yeah, we need to work. We need to go back to PR.
All right, we'll workshop it. Chris will give us his feedback.
Absolutely. Hopefully, he'll never watch this. Yeah, no. At some point, we were going to actually talk about real, like the news existing, but
does it?
Instead of that, should we talk about how awesome the original Harley Quinn was? Because that's
I didn't know if you would. Yeah, I like bringing this up. She died a few days ago. Arlene Sorkin, kind of a bummer. Only a year after Kevin Conroy, less than a year.
Oh yeah, all of the giants of the greatest superhero cartoon ever made. That's no good.
Yeah, they're on the poster behind me. To be transparent, I had a dream of getting it signed by the actors portraying it, but now 2 of them have passed.
Boo.
I have a Mask of the Phantasm poster signed by Kevin, but
I was just realizing I had never seen that and how I needed to watch it.
Man, what? We need to end the podcast at this very second.
I gotta go.
I think it's the best Batman movie, the best Superman movie, best animated movie. It's just all of it.
Yeah, I need to watch that because that cartoon is.
And I'm biased, but.
And those voice actors are perfect.
Yeah. Although Harley's not in it, but yeah, rip to Harley. People don't realize that she, like Paul Dini was friends with her, and if people look it up, she did this skit on the Days of Our Lives where she dressed like a clown and played a jester type character that inspired Paul to like, okay, let me give the Joker this woman jester type sidekick, and I'll cast Arlene Sorkin as her, and I'll make her name Harleen. And she'll voice her. And then every voice since has been a real imitation. I've loved them, but they've been imitations ultimately. I think most would agree of that original voice.
Yeah, I just get as an aside, I want Margot Robbie to succeed in life solely because she was in the Suicide Squad. It sucked, but she was like, you know what? I didn't suck. And my portrayal of Harley Quinn didn't suck. What if I
Not
just
at
take
all.
that out and make a better movie? So
Yeah.
I wish her luck in all of her endeavors, and will someday watch Barbie in honor of that fact.
Yeah, she
That
rules
actually
as Harley Quinn. Great
I
casting.
didn't expect to like a live action one as well, because I think outside of a cartoon, that character can be very tricky to.
I agree.
Like, I've read some comic things, including where, I mean, of course, they had to sex up her outfit. Can't wear like a
Yeah.
jester outfit, because then what will the boys look at? And that's another reason Suicide Squad was so obnoxious.
Yeah.
But I've seen actual comic stories where she's very like, she's doing evil, but she's sort of angsty about it in a way that just doesn't work, because it's just sort of.
She's really tricky. Is she an anti-hero? Because we've done that before, but it's like that doesn't even really capture her. She's such a complex character. She's really
And
become.
the cartoon, like, she's a battered girlfriend, but there's also a comedic element, and it actually mostly works in a way that seems literally impossible. That
Yeah.
there's this weird humor, but like there's so much like pathos, and it's so tragic, but she's so
Yeah.
funny. It's so good.
I agree. I mean, what an impossible tightrope to walk. I think the performances really helped that with Arlene, and then Mark Hamill as the Joker. It's something I agree, because I'll find myself feeling so sad for Harley at the same moments I'm laughing or finding humor in whatever situation that her and the Joker are in. I mean, yeah. I was just watching. I watched a few episodes with her the other day after she died, and um, so if people want to go back, they should watch Harley's Holiday, and
Is
uh,
that the slapstick, the
yeah, it's
like
kind of like
on the lamb thing?
yeah, kind of almost like a Looney Tunes style chase.
I love that one at the end when Batman gives her the dress.
Yeah, it's probably it makes me tear up
That's
too.
what
It's really he's like, I know what it's like to have a bad day. It's probably one of the
Oh,
best little moments written
I
and acted
know. Oh, it's so
in the
good.
canon, yeah. And
And
then
that Batman, just like, there's like one episode with Poison Ivy where I think she's actually up to something. But like, he's like suspicious. Like, he goes to check up on her and stuff. Like, he doesn't really trust these people. But if they really did go straight and like get like, he'd be all for it,
well,
Like, he's.
oh yeah, that's why that's the best version of the character. He's that dichotomy in humans. We can be really distrusting, but at the same time, we're hopeful. And so it's
Mhm.
how do we navigate that? And Harley's Holiday is just like that. I mean, the premise of the episode is she gets out. She's on her holiday, right? She's and Batman is trying to keep her out of prison. So it's total
Mhm.
inversion of, right, like the superhero, putting the villain in prison. That episode, delightfully is all about him trying to, like, because she's kind of isn't really getting caught up with the laws. She's trying her best, but that
Mhm.
episode is so great. And then Harley and Ivy is the other one I would recommend, because that one is riffs on Thelma and Louise and puts them on
And they
through some
canonically
shenanigans.
get together, not literally in the cartoon because it was the 90s and we were very silly,
Yeah,
but
they do everything but imply a
yeah,
relationship.
actually, in the cartoon, there is a lot of
They share.
actual
They live
relationships.
together
Yeah,
for extended periods. That's
yeah.
clear. Um, but beyond that, I mean, the show didn't. It's amazing that the show introduced her and sort of inadvertently created a character that could be so complex, because it's like, oh, what is it's just, it starts as just, oh, what if the Joker had a female sidekick? But like,
Right.
wait, that's a really weird idea. Like, what is she like? Why would she do that? What are her goals? What's her past?
I
Um,
mean,
yeah,
like superheroes, like it's such like a ridiculous history of what if girl version of boy superhero we
of
already
course,
have. I mean, I don't know how many
of
years it took
course,
me to realize there was I'm sorry, a Batwoman, because like
yeah,
using Batgirl in our era was much more of a thing.
of course.
Um, when I realized they all had like pets and stuff, like
Yeah, we gotta bring those back. I love the
the
pet.
silly, but like I think Harley works better. Harley is more distinctive in some ways than a lot of
Yeah,
those.
because I don't think she was meant to be a female version of the Joker. She's literally a sidekick. She's his Robin. She's not
Right.
his
That's true.
his Batgirl, I think. So it's kind of interesting, like, because then you have the innate conflict. Well, she has to get out of this abusive relationship because that's all it can ever be with a character like the Joker. So you have this innate conflict and arc for her. And that the cartoon we were talking about, where Kaylee Cuoco voices her, the new ongoing Harley Quinn cartoon, explores her with such great depth. I mean, the cartoon has flaws, but overall I think it's really underrated and deeply explores her characterization.
I just think that the fact that she worked so well in her original cartoon, I feel like people are always dissing cartoon. I mean, cartoonish is like a pejorative, you know, but cartoons and every Disney movie that like let's remake our classic thing with this soulless, realistic, and you know, like cartoons. I don't know. I love cartoons so much more than I did as a child. It's really weird.
Oh, sometimes I feel the same. I really do. They're lovely and far more creative than a lot of live action stuff. And of course, a lot of live action stuff now is no less animated than cartoons because it involves CGI, which is animation. And it's like, yeah, this implicit denigration or explicit, but more implicit with these Disney remakes of the animated medium.
I mean, the overriding thing is I want give me more money, but at the same time, to do that you're talking about the same studio that made what is known as like a masterpiece of animation. That was their thing, and it's impossible not to be sort of degrading your own masterpiece. I mean, it's like
it's very strange.
I'm trying to think of an art equivalent of like. You know, like something like I'm gonna copy Van Gogh, but like make a weird Photoshop, like I don't know, just the most soulless sort of.
I thought like analogy would be like you took a Van Gogh painting and then tried to like recreate it through photography.
Yeah, but even like, that sounds slightly more interesting. If
actually, that does sound that actually now that I say it, it does sound pretty interesting. But nevertheless, I think that's the most accurate analogy where it's like you're just translating it to this other medium for what purpose exactly?
Yeah, for money.
Oh, right, I forgot. Yeah, of course.
But also the fact that the writing is like fucking Mulan. What a fucking.
I haven't seen most of them. I saw the first one. I think the first one was Alice in Wonderland, and I watched that because Alice in Wonderland, the Disney version, is among my very, very favorite movies, and I fucking hated it. The live action version.
That at least there's probably been a lot more versions because that is a book.
No, there's tons of other live action versions, but like the Disney one with like Johnny Depp as the Mad Hatter. I hated that movie.
I should watch the cartoon because that's the kind of cartoon that like scared me a lot as a child.
I was always obsessed with it. It's by a million times my favorite Disney movie.
Like,
yeah, so good.
I saw Grave of the Fireflies as a child for the first and I saw My Neighbor Totoro as an adult, and My Neighbor Totoro would have scared me so much as a child. Mostly the cat bus, but a couple of other things. I was very scared of slightly sinister animation as a child, which is probably now why I love it so much, because it still has an element of like, you know, like really trippy early Max Fleischer cartoons with like Coco the Clown and Betty Boop. Really weird, trippy, like sort of seems like they were actually on drugs, not even like a tired joke. There's one really early one where they're like start off at the dentist and there's like laughing gas, like Betty Boop's at the dentist and the laughing gas escapes the cartoon and goes into the real world. It's so
really
weird.
Oh, that sounds super fun. You should send me that if you. I've seen a lot of the Fleischer Popeye and Superman because I
even older than that
love those characters. But yeah, I'm saying I don't think I've gone back to see a lot of what you're talking.
YouTube has some stuff like the earliest Betty Boop. The earliest Coco the Clown is practically like an exercise in animation from like 1919 or something, where it'll be like a hand drawing him and he starts doing stuff. One of your cats is named Felix, though, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever looked up really, really early Felix the cat?
No, I should though. No, I think
there's some there's some really funny ones. The very first one is really dark and very strange.
Oh, really?
But there's one where Felix punches the man in the moon in the face.
What?
I forget. It's like that's laughing at him. Like moonshine, like the beverage is involved, but then. Like,
I love that connection.
He like punches the moon.
That sounds great. I mean, cartoons are great. They're underrated, and back then they could do more weird or even adult type scary, type things.
Mhm.
For instance, I would say before people
Very
like got
strange.
more moralistic maybe about cartoons.
Yeah,
So
I mean, they were always mostly vaguely for children, but like weren't children in 1930 scared at all? Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were like the Great Depression's
I
going
don't
on. I don't have time to be scared of
know.
fucking dancing ghosts and skeletons. Even really, really early Disney things. Like
Yeah,
there's like this dancing skeleton one that's very
yeah,
good.
yeah. I mean, skeletons are scary. I would have been scared of that.
Yeah, there's just something and part one reason that I became also more fascinated with toys as an adult also is that there's a similar like you can get so much across in an expression in sort of simple lines, and it applies to both cases, and I just find that
That's a great point.
very captivating.
That's a great
Um,
point. Toys rule. I love toys.
it's true. Well, wow. I feel like we learned a lot. It always
We've
comes back to Batman, though,
we've
doesn't
learned a
it?
lot. We've grown a lot as people in this time span, which is not exactly an hour, but please forgive us, audience.
Uh, and
We'll be an
Chris.
hour next time.
No, it'll be 5 hours next time. We can do
Whoa.
another episode in like we can do whatever we want. We can make 1,000 episodes.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Once we get to 1,000, and we'll be like, we did it.
Um, yeah, we didn't talk about anything topical and news like, and that's what I love to see. Like that's the dream. It all comes down to the end of Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau, where after he's been bailed out of jail, he goes berry picking with some boys from the village, and he's like, and
As
then
one does.
the state was nowhere to be seen, or something. There's a line I was like, yes.
Holy shit. I've never read it, but that sounds great.
Oh, you gotta read that shit. It's short. It's
I
very.
think I have it, maybe,
I
but
mean,
never read
he says he's not a no government man. You know, he says it. He's like
it. He was on the
he's
fence,
basically
wasn't
he's admitting to be a minarchist straight up
he?
in the text.
Okay.
Um, but
Then
it's
I'm
a
not interested. No, of course.
get the fuck out of here, you anarchist scum. Um, but it's such a good it's such a good the poetry of the text and some of
Yeah.
like the attempted ideals. People like I'm not going to read Walden. It looks kind of tedious, and yeah, like his mom did his laundry or whatever. I don't know, but as just like a poetic essay of principle and hope, like Civil Disobedience is lovely. Like I highly recommend that.
Okay. Well, I think I will disobey you and not read that ever in my life. But thanks for the recommendation, Lucy. Hopefully, our
That's
viewers get something out of it.
fine. Then I will never read this, which is next.
No.
Yeah. Okay, I probably will. It's fine.
You don't want to fight fascism? Well.
I'm busy, but I hope it does. I mean,
busy.
that's a whole other question. That's a doozy. But I wish it nothing but failure and ruin and forgetting, and just
Yep.
don't.
All the F's.
See, this is the problem when you're my friend and talking to you is fun, and therefore the end result is not, some might say, as polished as it might be.
No. I think that's what endears us to our millions of viewers and
Our
listeners.
millions of viewers.
Yeah. Well, I haven't looked at the raw numbers, but I heard through the grapevine. My understanding is that we're getting at least millions of viewers.
I have heard that.
Yeah. Okay.
I've heard that.
If any viewers can confirm or deny that below in the comments, please help tell us. But yeah, let us know if you're talking about this at the water cooler the next day. Sure, most of you are.
Yeah, and pour me a drink because it's 90 degrees.
Yeah. Pour Lucy a drink. Genius of you to be working at a job where you get money. But
I'm going to tell my husband you said that.
Tell that genius of a man that you locked down smartly.
I did. It's true. I did do that.
There you go. What's this? A toy?
Yes.
Talk about expressions.
Yeah, I love this because this is Wage, the ugly doll. And when I discovered his name was Wage, I made a stupid joke in my head and was like, a toy named Wage, and he has a job, as described on the tag, late capitalism. Am I right, folks? Which is also a term I think is stupid anyway. But then it turns out that it had a really adorable origin where the creator like drew a little doodle of this guy to his girlfriend in South Korea and was like, I miss you. I hope we can get together. Here I am working so we can be together again. And then she made a doll, and then they started selling the doll.
What? Oh
So I
my
was like,
god.
that's the cutest thing I've ever heard.
That's a great story behind the toy. Wow, I never
Yeah.
expected that.
I just had to explain my stupid mind joke about wage.
Yeah,
Even
and
the toys have jobs now.
for listeners, sucks for you because Lucy's showing the toy on camera and you can't see it. Try watching our show like a real fan.
Yeah, like a real American on YouTube.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
That seems like a good note to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
America and you, etc. I have nothing. It's
Well,
hot.
I think this was a success.
I can't podcast when it's hot.
I'm the one who lives in Florida.
My air conditioning has been off for officially an hour and a half.
Oh, because of the loudness, right?
Yeah.
The noise. Well, I'll let you get back to your precious AC. And CM can go back to his air conditioned.
We could talk about the news sometimes, or the philosophy sometimes.
Philosophy of the news.
Yeah. No, you know what?
Is this part of the podcast?
You know what? I don't know anymore. I'm just gonna say I had a good time.
I had a great time too.
Everyone else can just listen politely. I was gonna say go to hell, and then I realized there was no need to say that.
I'll say that. Everyone else, go to hell.
As soon as we hit an hour and a half, I go insane. So
that's just when it gets good.
I started insane and I got kind of normal, and then there's.
I don't know. I feel like your insane levels were off the charts for the vast majority of my interactions with you at any point in time.
In our entire lives. This has been the 5th episode of the Anti-Power Hour.
Yeah.
And someday there'll be a 6th, and
someday
think it's going to be great. So, goodbye.
I doubt it, but
audience.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for listening or watching, or neither.
Yeah. See you next time.